She delivered lunch to his office daily, and the billionaire CEO secretly fell for her. She was just the lunch delivery girl until the day she vanished, and the billionaire who never showed emotion risked everything to find her. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. It was 12:47 p.m. when he heard it again. That faint melody drifting down the hallway. Soft, unintentional. Like someone humming just to make the day pass easier. Ethan Vale looked up from the stack of reports in front of him, the glass walls of his penthouse office framing a skyline that only reminded him how high up he was, and how alone. The song? He could never catch the tune exactly, but it made him stop whatever he was doing. Every time. It came just before the knock. 3 gentle taps. Always 3, never more. He stood, straightened his dark gray shirt, and took a slow breath before saying, "Come in." And there she was, backlit by sunlight, wearing that same faded red delivery shirt tucked into her jeans. Her long dark hair was tied in a messy ponytail, loose strands falling over her cheek. She stepped in, clutching the insulated lunch bag close to her side. Her smile was small, almost hesitant, but her eyes were alive. Like she noticed things no one else did. Like she felt the world in ways others had forgotten. "Hi," she said softly. "Lunch for Mr. Vale." He nodded, hiding the way his chest always tightened at the sight of her. "You can leave it on the table." She walked in, light-footed, careful not to make noise. No perfume, no heels, just the quiet grace of someone who didn't need to impress to be unforgettable. As she placed the lunch on the table, Ethan caught sight of the small necklace she wore every day, a tiny silver charm shaped like a leaf. He never asked what it meant. He never asked her name either, but he knew it. He had asked the receptionist once, months ago, under the guise of needing to confirm the catering account. Her name was Liana. He watched as she adjusted the bag, double-checking it like always. "I added an extra cookie today, the good kind." Ethan raised an eyebrow, the edge of his mouth curling. "There's a good kind?" She met his eyes briefly, her smile blooming just a little. "There's always a good kind." It was the most words they had exchanged all week. Then, as always, she turned, gave a soft nod, and slipped out. He stood there, heart strangely full and strangely heavy. This had been going on for 6 months now. 6 months of her bringing him lunch, quietly, gently, while the world around him rushed, demanded, and shouted. Ethan Vale was a billionaire, CEO of Vale Tech, son of legacy, holder of power, and completely invisible in the eyes of most, except hers. She never treated him like a title, never tried to impress, never asked for anything. And that terrified him more than anything else, because a part of him had started waiting for that lunch break every day, for her knock, for that melody in the hallway. That evening, as the office cleared and the city turned golden, Ethan sat alone, untouched meal still on his desk. He picked up the cookie she had left, oatmeal chocolate chip, slightly cracked on one side. Definitely homemade. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and remembered something he hadn't felt in years: warmth. But warmth was dangerous. It made you hope. It made you want things you had no right to want. So he did what he always did. He picked up his pen and buried himself in work. The next day she didn't come. It was a Friday. She never missed Fridays. By 1:30 p.m., Ethan was pacing. By 2 p.m., he had called the lobby, trying to make it sound casual. "Yes, the usual lunch delivery. I know, I'm not upset. Just wondering if there was a change." But no one knew anything. Something twisted inside him. Something sharp. She had never been late. Never once in 6 months. And now she was just gone. Was this how it ended? A small absence? No explanation? He sat down, staring at the untouched files. But the only thing he could think about was the girl with the humming heart. At exactly 2:43 p.m., his phone buzzed, unknown number. He picked it up immediately. "Hello?" Silence. Then, Hi, it's Liana. He froze. Her voice was quieter than usual, not shy, uncertain, like she was choosing her words carefully. I'm really sorry for not showing up today. I didn't want you to think I forgot. He almost laughed, with relief, with something more. I didn't think that. I was surprised. A pause. Then she spoke again. My grandmother fell this morning. She's okay now, but I had to take her to the hospital. I didn't want to worry you, but I also didn't want to just disappear. His throat tightened. You didn't disappear, he said softly. Another pause. That's kind of you. Then silence. The line hummed gently. Finally, she added, I'll be back Monday. Just wanted to let you know, that's all. He wanted to say something, anything to keep her on the line, but all that came out was, thank you for calling. She whispered, have a good weekend, and hung up. That night, Ethan didn't open his laptop. He didn't answer emails. He walked out of his office at 6 o'clock sharp, got into his black car, and instead of heading home, he told his driver, take me somewhere quiet. I don't care where. Somewhere without noise. Somewhere she might hum. But Monday came, and she wasn't the one who walked in. It was a different delivery girl, polite, stiff, expressionless. Ethan's heart dropped. He stared at the bag she placed on his table. No humming, no leaf necklace, no quiet kindness in the room. Is Liana okay? He asked, trying not to sound too eager. The girl tilted her head. She didn't tell you? His stomach turned. Tell me what? She quit. Ethan stood frozen. Quit? She said she couldn't come anymore. Something about family. Didn't give details. He felt like the floor had shifted beneath him. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence, just gone. And that's when he knew. He had to find her. He didn't know how, or what he would say when he did. But he couldn't just sit there anymore, surrounded by glass and gold and everything except the one person who made this cold life feel a little warmer. Not after everything she had quietly changed in him. What happened to Liana? Why did she leave so suddenly? And what is Ethan willing to risk to find her? Ethan Vale wasn't used to being ignored. He could call the mayor and get a meeting by noon. He could send an email and make entire markets shift by morning. But for the first time in years, someone had walked out of his life without explanation, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. Liana. Her name stayed in his mind, like the echo of a song half remembered. Her quiet presence, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she smiled, the leaf-shaped necklace she always wore. He didn't even know where she lived, or who she really was. But he was determined to find out. Monday evening, Ethan stayed late at the office, not to work, but to do something he hadn't done in years. He went down to the lobby. The receptionist looked up, startled. Mr. Vale? I need a list, he said, of all the lunch vendors who delivered here in the last 6 months, specifically the one Liana worked for. The woman hesitated. Sir, I think she was working independently. She used the name L&N Catering, but it's not a formal company. No website, no office. That made sense. Liana always carried just one thermal bag, never wore any company logos. Ethan's voice softened. Do you have any contact details? The receptionist pulled up an old delivery receipt. There's a phone number here. Want me to call? No, he said quickly. I'll do it. That night, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse apartment. City lights shimmered through the massive glass windows. But for once, he didn't notice them. He dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. Hi, this is Liana. If you're calling about food orders, I'm no longer delivering for now. Please, take care and thank you for your support. He sat still, holding the phone long after the message ended. She sounded tired, not the same humming girl he remembered. The next morning, he went further. He asked his driver to take him across the city, to the address linked to her food permit. It wasn't in the fancy part of town. It was a quiet, worn-down neighborhood, lined with old apartment buildings and cracked sidewalks. Kids played soccer barefoot in a dusty lot nearby. Stray cats wandered between parked cars. The building itself was modest. No elevator, paint peeling from the walls. Ethan stood at the front door for several minutes before he found the courage to ring the bell marked 2B. No answer. He waited, knocked again. Then the door next to it opened slightly, revealing an older woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "Looking for Liana?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes, is she here?" The woman hesitated, then opened the door wider. "She's not home. Took her grandmother to the clinic. You must be the boss she used to deliver lunch to." He blinked. "How did you—" "She talked about you. Said you were always kind. Said you never once treated her like, someone below." Ethan's chest tightened. "She quit suddenly," he said. "Do you know why?" The woman looked at him for a long moment. "She doesn't like people worrying about her, but things haven't been easy lately. Bills piling up. Her grandmother's getting worse. She didn't want charity. Just peace." Ethan looked down, ashamed of how much he had assumed, that she was just gone, that she'd chosen to leave. "Do you know where I can find her?" The woman smiled gently. "Come back tomorrow. Same time. She should be home by then." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his apartment, the city buzzing below him, his heart louder than the traffic. He remembered her voice on the phone. The extra cookie. The way she looked at him like he was just a person, not a CEO, not a billionaire, just a man. And he wondered, not for the first time, not what her life was really like beyond those elevator rides and quiet lunches. The next day, he returned. He climbed the stairs slowly, every step heavier than the last. When he reached the second floor, the door to 2B was already open. She stood in the doorway, Liana holding a plastic grocery bag in one hand, her hair tied up loosely, her eyes wide with surprise. She wasn't humming. She wasn't smiling. She looked like someone who had been caught off guard, someone who wasn't used to being the center of attention. "Mr. Vale?" she asked, almost in disbelief. He nodded. "Aye." She blinked, then stepped aside, letting him in without a word. The apartment was small, barely enough room for the couch and kitchenette, but it was clean, warm, filled with soft colors and the faint scent of cinnamon. Her grandmother's wheelchair sat by the window. Liana put the groceries down and turned to face him. "Why are you here?" He paused. This was the moment. No boardrooms, no rehearsals, just truth. "I came because you left," he said. "And I didn't realize how much that would matter to me until you were gone." She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't want to make things awkward. I didn't want you to feel obligated." "I don't," he said quickly. "I feel lost. You brought something into my life that I didn't even know I needed." She shook her head, trying to smile, but her eyes were glassy. "I'm just the lunch girl." He stepped closer. "No," he said softly. "You're Liana, the girl who hums when she walks, the girl who gave me the only moment of peace in my day, and I'm sorry I waited this long to say it." She looked up at him then, and for the first time really saw him. Not the suit, not the title, just the man. But before either of them could say another word, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed completely. Her hands shook. "It's the hospital," she whispered. And everything froze. What happened at the hospital? Will Liana need to make a painful decision? And how far is Ethan willing to go for her now that he's seen her truth? Liana's hand trembled as she brought the phone to her ear. "Hello?" Ethan watched her closely. Her back was straight, her breath held as if bracing for something she didn't want to hear. "Yes, this is she." A pause. Her eyes dimmed. Then, "I understand. We'll be there right away." She hung up and stood frozen for a moment, her fingers curling tightly around the phone. Ethan took a step forward. "Liana?" She finally looked at him. Her voice was calm, but her face had gone pale. They're moving my grandmother to ICU. Ethan felt the words like a weight in his chest. He didn't know her grandmother, hadn't even seen her face, but he saw the fear in Liana's eyes, and that was enough. "I'll drive you," he said, without hesitation. She blinked. "No, it's okay. I'll take a cab. I'm not letting you go through this alone." He didn't say it to impress her. He didn't say it because he felt guilty or responsible. He said it because he meant it. Deeply, completely. Because in that moment, he wanted to be the person she could lean on. And maybe he needed someone to care about too. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fluorescent lights. Nurses rushed past, announcements echoed over the intercom, and everything felt too fast, too loud, except for Liana. She moved like someone trying not to break. Ethan stayed close but didn't crowd her. He kept his distance, physically, but his eyes never left her. They reached the ICU waiting area. A nurse recognized Liana and came over. "She had another episode," the nurse explained gently. "Her breathing dropped. We stabilized her, but she's sleeping now. You can't see her yet, but we'll let you know." Liana nodded, biting her bottom lip. The nurse placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and walked away. Ethan sat down beside her in the stiff plastic chairs. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, he asked, "How long has she been sick?" Liana hesitated. "A few years. It got worse recently. The dementia. Sometimes she forgets where she is, or who I am. But she still smiles when I sing to her." He looked at her carefully. "Was that the melody I kept hearing?" She nodded, eyes wet. "It's her favorite lullaby. I used to hum it on my way to work. Helped calm me down." He gave a small smile. "It calmed me down, too." Liana looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since that call, her shoulders lowered. Her breath came easier. "She raised me, you know," she whispered. "My mom left when I was little. My grandmother gave up everything to take care of me. Now it's my turn." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He could see it so clearly. The sacrifices, the long days, the quiet strength in her. "She's lucky to have you," he said. Liana turned toward him, searching his face. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" He swallowed. "Because you made me feel human again, and I didn't even realize how empty I'd been until I started missing you." Her breath caught. "I'm not some fairy tale," she said gently. "I don't live in your world. I'm barely surviving mine." He shook his head. "Maybe we've both been surviving instead of living." For a moment, they just looked at each other. No walls, no barriers. And in that silence, something shifted. Hours passed. A nurse finally returned and said Liana could go in for 5 minutes. Ethan waited outside. She stepped in and sat beside the bed where her grandmother lay, fragile, quiet, but breathing. Liana took her hand and began to hum the same soft tune Ethan had heard every day in the hallways. The old woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Liana," she murmured, weak but lucid. "I'm here, Grandma," Liana whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her grandmother smiled faintly. "You're a good girl. Always were." Liana bent over, resting her forehead gently against her grandmother's. "I love you," she whispered. The monitor beeped softly, and in the hallway, Ethan sat quietly, hands clasped, thinking not about stocks or boardrooms, but about family, about what mattered, about how many years he'd let go by without holding anyone's hand. When Liana came back out, her eyes were red but steady. "She's resting again," she said. "Thank you for waiting." "I'd wait all night." Liana didn't reply, but a small smile broke through. Soft, tired, but real. They walked outside. The air was cold, streetlights buzzed, the city never really slept. "I'll call a cab," she said, reaching for her phone. Ethan stopped her. "Let me take you home." She looked up at him, hesitant. "You've already done so much." "You've done more for me," he replied. They drove in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that comes when words feel small compared to what's already been shared. When they reached her building, she opened the door slowly, then turned back. "Ethan." He looked at her. "Don't fall for someone just because they brought you lunch." He smiled, but his voice was serious. "Too late." Liana froze. A dozen emotions flashed across her face. Disbelief, fear, something like hope. And then she said quietly, "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it," he said, "more than anything I've ever said in my life." She didn't answer, just looked at him one last time before disappearing inside. Back in his car, Ethan sat still for a long time. Something in him had changed, quietly, powerfully. But he didn't know that tomorrow, everything he had just discovered would be tested. What test awaits Ethan and Liana next? Will the truth of their different worlds push them apart, or bring them even closer? Liana didn't sleep that night. She lay on the small couch beside her grandmother's bed, listening to the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Outside, the wind whispered through the window cracks, but her mind was louder. Don't fall for someone just because they brought you lunch. Too late. Ethan's words repeated in her head like a soft thunder. Too bold, too impossible, too dangerous. She had spent years building her life on small certainties, morning routines, quiet sacrifices, never dreaming too big. Because when you dreamed big, you fell harder, and her life couldn't afford a fall. But now, he was in her life, not just in quiet lunches and short greetings, but truly there, seeing her world, hearing her truth, staying when he could have walked away, and that terrified her. Ethan, meanwhile, was back in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling, fully dressed, still wearing his watch, the one his father left him. He remembered how his father used to say, "Don't mistake wealth for worth." And yet, for most of his life, Ethan had done exactly that. He'd chased power, deals, respect, but none of it had ever made him feel like Liana's 5-minute smile had. Not once. He knew the rules of his world, knew that his board members would scoff at the idea of him falling for a lunch girl, knew that headlines didn't care about real love, only about scandal and class. But for the first time he didn't care. She mattered. More than all the noise. The next morning, Liana got a call from the hospital. Her grandmother had stabilized. The doctor said the worst had passed. For now. Relief flooded through her, but with it came a hard truth. The medical bills had doubled overnight, and her savings? Nearly gone. She walked back from the hospital, gripping the paper invoice in her bag like it was made of fire. Her eyes stung. She had already quit her delivery work. She'd already sold most of what she could. There was no one to help, no one to call. Except, she stopped in her tracks. No, she wouldn't ask Ethan. She couldn't. If he helped her now, it would never be real. He'd always wonder if she was with him for the right reasons. Or worse, she would. No matter how deeply she felt for him, she couldn't let money cloud the truth. Later that afternoon, Ethan surprised her again. He showed up at her apartment. No driver this time, just him. In his hand, a small brown paper bag. "Thought you could use lunch today," he said with a soft smile. She let him in, and for a moment it almost felt normal, like the roles had flipped, like he was delivering peace this time. They sat at the tiny kitchen table, 2 mismatched mugs, chicken salad sandwiches. No silverware, no formality. It was perfect. They laughed a little, talked about simple things. The street musicians downtown, her grandmother's fondness for telenovelas. Ethan told her how he once burned an entire steak trying to impress a date in college. She laughed for real this time. A sweet, full laugh that made his heart ache in the best way. And just as the quiet comfort settled between them, he noticed the edge of the hospital bill sticking out from her notebook. Liana saw his eyes flick to it. Her body tensed. "I'm handling it," she said quickly, grabbing it and sliding it out of sight. Ethan didn't press. But something shifted in the air. "Let me help," he said gently. She shook her head. "No, I mean it. You being here is everything. But I can't let money come between that." "It wouldn't," he said, "not for me." "It would for me." Silence. Liana's voice trembled as she continued, "I've seen what happens when money gets involved in feelings. I've seen people trade their hearts for security. I won't be one of them. I'd rather suffer honestly than love with doubt." Ethan looked at her with something close to awe. "Do you know how rare you are?" She gave a sad smile. "Rare doesn't pay hospital bills." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his father's watch. He placed it on the table between them. "This was my father's. I've had it since I was a teenager. I've never taken it off. Until now." She stared at it, confused. "I'm leaving it with you," he said, "not as payment, not as charity, as a promise." "A promise?" "That I won't try to fix your life with money, that I see you, I hear you, and I'll earn whatever part of you you're willing to give, the way you've earned mine." Tears filled her eyes. She picked up the watch slowly, cradling it in her palms like something sacred. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, and something inside her melted. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he replied. She set the watch down. Then, almost instinctively, she reached out and touched his hand, not with desperation, not with need, but with something deeper. Trust. They sat there in silence, connected by something no title or status could define. But just as their walls began to crumble, Liana's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from someone she hadn't heard from in years, her mother. The text was short. "Heard about Grandma. I'm coming. We need to talk." Liana stared at the screen, hands suddenly ice cold. Ethan noticed her expression change. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer. Because no. Everything was about to get much, much more complicated. Who is Liana's mother, and what secrets has she kept hidden all these years? What does her sudden return mean? And will it threaten everything Liana is building with Ethan? The knock came just after sunset. Liana didn't move right away. She just stood in the middle of her living room, staring at the door like it might open by itself. She could feel the weight of her childhood behind that wooden frame, the kind of weight you carry in your bones. Ethan stood beside her. "Do you want me to go?" he asked softly. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward him, warm, scared, grateful. "No," she said. "I want you here." She walked to the door and opened it slowly. And there she was, her mother. The woman was in her early 50s but looked older, her face drawn, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp but tired. She held a worn duffel bag in one hand, her expression unreadable. "Hi, Liana." Liana swallowed hard. "It's been 10 years. "I know." "You never called." "I know." They stood in silence. Then the woman looked past her and spotted Ethan. Her brow lifted slightly. Curious, maybe even suspicious. "I didn't come to fight," her mother said, stepping inside. "I came because I heard about your grandmother. I figured you'd need help." Liana folded her arms. "Why now?" Her mother sighed and placed the bag down. "I left when I thought it would make your life easier. I wasn't ready to be a mother. And I knew your grandma would do better for you than I ever could." "You weren't wrong," Liana said flatly. The words hung heavy between them. Ethan stayed quiet. This wasn't his moment. It was hers. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," her mother said more quietly now. "But I thought I should be here, at least for her. And maybe, if you'll let me, for you." Liana blinked, her voice breaking. "She doesn't even remember you anymore." "That doesn't mean I can't try." The words were honest, maybe even painful. And in that instant, Liana didn't know whether to scream, cry, or collapse. She nodded once. "She's asleep. Don't wake her." Then she walked past her mother and into the kitchen. Ethan followed, quietly keeping his distance. When they were alone, Liana leaned on the counter, her arms trembling. "I haven't seen her since I was 17, she whispered. "She left without a goodbye. No letter, no number, nothing." Ethan gently touched her shoulder. "You don't owe her anything, but part of me still wants something, even after everything. Closure? Maybe, or just to understand." She looked up at him then, her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't want this to pull me back into who I used to be. I've worked so hard to be strong." Ethan brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're the strongest person I know. Letting someone return doesn't erase what you've survived." A long silence passed between them. Then she asked, "Would you stay tonight? Not like that. Just here. I don't want to be alone." He nodded without hesitation. "I'll sleep on the couch." She smiled faintly. "It's not very comfortable." He smiled back. "Neither is my office chair. I've survived worse." That night, as the apartment fell into a fragile sleep, Liana sat by her grandmother's bedside, humming softly. Ethan dozed off nearby, still in his dress shirt, long legs folded awkwardly on the couch. And in the next room, her mother sat in the dark, watching an old photo of Liana on her phone. Age 5, missing a tooth, arms wrapped around a stuffed giraffe. A quiet tear slipped down her cheek. Morning came. Liana awoke to find her mother already in the kitchen, making eggs and toast like it was a normal Saturday. The scent reminded Liana of childhood, before everything broke. "You still put cinnamon in the eggs," Liana said. Her mother smiled without turning. "Some things stick." They sat at the table, the air awkward, cautious but warmer than the night before. Then, just as Ethan emerged from the other room, coffee in hand, her mother asked the question Liana had been dreading. "So, what's going on between you two?" Liana's fork froze mid-air. Ethan glanced at her, then looked her mother straight in the eye. "I care about her," he said, voice steady. Her mother narrowed her eyes. "What kind of care are we talking about?" "Real care," Ethan replied. "The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return." Liana's heart pounded. Her mother leaned back, studying him. "You a rich boy?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm comfortable." "Don't ruin her," her mother said bluntly. "She's worked too hard to build herself." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." A long beat passed, and then to Liana's surprise, her mother nodded. That was it. No speech, no drama. Just a small nod that felt heavier than words. Later that afternoon, Ethan offered to walk to the corner store to grab medicine for Liana's grandmother. She handed him the list and kissed his cheek before she realized she'd done it. He paused, smiled. "I'll be right back." Liana stood at the window and watched him go. But just minutes after he left, her phone rang. She picked it up, expecting the hospital again. But the voice on the other end was cold, professional. "Miss Liana Torres?" "Yes?" "This is Thompson from Vailtech's Board of Directors. We've been made aware of your connection to Mr. Ethan Vale." Her blood ran cold. I don't understand. We need to talk. In person. Privately." "What is this about?" A pause. "We believe Mr. Vale may be compromising company interests for personal reasons, and you may be involved." Her breath caught. "You're wrong. We'll be in touch again shortly. Don't speak to him until you do." Click. Liana dropped the phone, her heart pounding. She stared at the door. Outside, Ethan was walking back, a brown bag in one hand and a smile on his face. He didn't know. He had no idea that his world had just started turning against them. Will Liana tell Ethan the truth about the call, or protect him by walking away? Can love survive the pressure of power, doubt, and the weight of both their pasts? The bag in Ethan's hand held nothing more than aspirin, cough syrup, and a small pack of honey-flavored lozenges. But as he climbed the apartment steps, whistling quietly, it felt like he was carrying something more. Hope. He hadn't felt this alive in years. being near Liana, laughing with her, waking up to the scent of cinnamon and quiet humming. It was like being handed a life he didn't know he wanted until it was almost too late. He knocked once before letting himself in. "Hey!" he called softly. "I brought the good stuff, and a chocolate bar because I'm reckless like that." But the smile on his face faded the second he saw her expression. Liana stood near the kitchen table, her hands gripping the edge like it was the only thing holding her up. Her eyes were wide, unreadable. Her phone lay on the table, the screen still glowing from the last call. "Liana," he asked, stepping forward. "What happened?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a smile so small it almost broke him. "Nothing," she said quietly. "Just tired. My mom left to visit a friend. Grandma's still resting." He tilted his head. "Are you sure?" She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet his. "Yeah, just one of those days." He didn't push, but his heart started to ache. Not because she was lying, but because she was trying to protect him from something, and he didn't know what. That night, Liana pretended everything was fine. They cooked dinner together. They watched a silly old movie on her cracked laptop. She even hummed a little, trying to make it feel normal. But her laugh was too light. Her eyes kept flicking toward her phone. Ethan noticed it all, every flicker of hesitation, every silence that lasted a second too long. And he knew something had changed. But he didn't ask again. He just stayed. Because if she needed space, he would give it. If she needed time, he would wait. But he wouldn't walk away. Not unless she told him to. Meanwhile, across town. Inside a polished conference room at Vale Tech, men in suits sat around a long table, whispering, judging, planning. "She's a risk," one of the board members said, tapping on a file with Liana's photo attached. "Unvetted, emotionally connected to our CEO, and with no business background. If this goes public, let me handle it," another voice said. It belonged to Renee Lynn, the youngest and most ambitious executive in the room. "We don't need to attack her," Renee continued. "We just need to remind Ethan what he has to lose." She leaned back in her chair, a thin smile on her face. "He'll choose the company. He always does." The next morning, Ethan showed up to the office for the first time in days. He had barely stepped into his private elevator when Renee was already waiting on the top floor, holding a sleek black folder. "You're glowing," she said coolly. "Must be quite the vacation." Ethan gave a polite smile, but his guard went up. "What do you need, Renee?" "We need to talk." She closed the office door behind her, dropped the folder on his desk, and flipped it open. Inside were surveillance photos, one of him walking into Liana's apartment, another of them holding hands outside the hospital. Ethan stared at the images, his face hardened. "Who authorized this?" "The board. They're nervous. You've been distracted, avoiding meetings, ignoring proposals. I've been dealing with a personal matter." "She's the matter," Renee said bluntly, "and personal becomes public when you're who you are." Ethan pushed the folder aside. "You think I'm ashamed of her?" "No, I think you're underestimating the damage this could cause. To her, the press, the investors, the whispers. They'll tear her apart, Ethan. Is that what you want?" He said nothing, so she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think love is enough to protect her from this world? Because it's not." He stood, jaw tight. "This conversation is over." As she left, Renee looked back one last time. "You have until the end of the week to make a decision. The board won't wait." That night, Ethan returned to Liana's apartment, but something had changed again. She wasn't waiting by the door. She wasn't humming. Instead, she was packing. "Liana?" She didn't look up, just folded a shirt and placed it gently in a small duffel bag. "I'm leaving for a few days," she said. "Where?" "My aunt's, just to clear my head." He walked toward her, confusion mixing with a rising panic. "Is this about your mom? The hospital? Talk to me." She stopped folding, and for a moment, everything was still. Then she turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes nearly crushed him. "I got a call," she whispered. "From your company. They think I'm a problem." "What?" "They said you might be compromising company interests, that I might be a threat to your reputation." Ethan's heart sank. "You believe them?" "No," she said quickly. "I believe you, but I also know what it's like to be dragged through the mud, and I won't let that happen to you, or to me." He reached for her hand. "Don't do this. Don't shut me out now." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm trying to protect what we have. Before the world poisons it." He shook his head. "We can face them together." But she pulled away. "I need to go." He stood still as she zipped the bag and slung it over her shoulder. She paused at the door, looked back at him one last time, and in the softest voice said, "Don't come after me." The door closed, and Ethan was left standing alone in the apartment that no longer smelled like cinnamon, but like silence. Will Ethan let her go, or fight for her despite the pressure of his world collapsing around them? Can love survive when fear demands distance and trust feels like a risk? 3 days. That's how long she was gone. And in those 3 days, Ethan Vale was not the man the world expected him to be. He skipped board meetings, ignored investor calls. His $1,000 suits hung untouched in his closet. Instead, he sat by the window of his penthouse every night, staring out at the same city where she was, somewhere, with her heart tied in knots and her mind tangled in doubt. He didn't chase her, because she'd asked him not to, but he couldn't stop writing her name in his mind. Liana. He played back every moment, her laughter, her stubborn strength, the way she hummed without realizing it, the way she made him feel like the world could be quiet, even for a man who owned half of it. He realized now, love wasn't about timing, or comfort, or status. It was about truth, and he wasn't going to let hers be silenced. Meanwhile, Liana sat on a small porch outside her aunt's house in the countryside, a single suitcase at her feet, a cold mug of tea beside her. She watched the sun set, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to let her heart settle. But it wouldn't, because she didn't leave to forget Ethan. She left so she wouldn't be a burden to him. But in her quiet, she had found no peace. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and frail from that hospital bed. "If you love someone, don't disappear. Love isn't supposed to feel like running away." And maybe that was the truth. Maybe she wasn't protecting him. Maybe she was protecting herself from a kind of happiness she didn't feel worthy of. On the 4th morning, her phone buzzed. A message. From Ethan. Just 2 words. "I waited." Then a second one. "But I won't anymore." Her heart jumped. And then a link. It was a live stream. Confused, she clicked it. And there he was, standing at the front of Valetech's annual press conference. A stage flooded with lights, cameras flashing, executives watching in confusion. He wasn't reading a speech. He wasn't promoting numbers. He was standing in front of the world and telling a story. "A few months ago," he said, "someone started delivering lunch to my office. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't care about my net worth. She just cared about the food being warm, and about humming songs that reminded her of her grandmother. She didn't sell me anything. She didn't need me to notice her. But I did. Because in a world full of noise, she was peace. And I've realized something. You can't build an empire on silence, or fear, or by hiding what matters most. I've spent years being what people needed me to be. Today, I'm choosing something else." He paused, his voice steady, clear. "I'm choosing her. So if this costs me everything, then at least I'll lose it standing for something real." Liana's hand covered her mouth. Her breath shook. She stared at the screen, at him, standing there, raw and unshaken. And suddenly, she wasn't afraid anymore. That afternoon, she didn't pack slowly. She didn't think twice. She ran to the bus stop, heart pounding, the wind pushing tears from her eyes. And for the first time in days, she felt weightless. Ethan had just left the building when she arrived. He was standing by the fountain outside, jacket in hand, tie gone, Sleeves rolled. He turned, and there she was, out of breath, hair messy from the wind, eyes full of something fragile and fierce. They stood there for a long second, neither speaking. Then she walked right up to him and placed his father's watch gently in his palm. "I told you not to come after me," she said, her voice trembling. "But you did anyway." He smiled faintly. "No, I waited. You came back." Her eyes welled up. "I was scared." "So was I. Everyone said we couldn't work." "Everyone," he said softly, "is not you." Then she did the thing she'd been afraid of for far too long. She reached up and kissed him, not because the moment demanded it, not because of drama, but because it was time, because he saw her and stayed. Because love doesn't wait forever, but it waits long enough. Weeks later, things didn't magically become perfect. Her grandmother still needed care. He still had a company to run. But now they faced it all together. He started spending Sundays in her tiny apartment, helping her cook and humming out of tune. She started coming to his office, not as a delivery girl, but as a woman who stood beside him, unafraid. Together they built something new. Not based on money, not based on saving or being saved, but on seeing and being seen. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it comes in quietly, like a girl humming in a hallway, not asking to be noticed. But the people who truly matter, they'll notice, they'll wait, they'll show up, they'll fight for you when you forget how to fight for yourself, and they'll remind you that you're worthy, not because of where you come from, but because of who you are when no one's looking. The end. Now it's your turn. Have you ever walked away from someone out of fear, only to realize you needed to fight for them? What would you do if love knocked, softly, and waited for you to open the door? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone out there might need your story too.